Hi there. In this video I'm going to talk about the Lightroom catalog and backing up. In previous videos I've repeatedly spoken about the Lightroom catalog. This is where Lightroom keeps all the information about our image files, their location and organization structure, keywords and development adjustments. All editing in Lightroom is non-destructive. Lightroom doesn't change any pixels in our images. It simply keeps a set of instructions of what adjustments we have made when editing. To make sure we don't lose all this work, we need to back up our catalogue, and there are some settings we need to adjust to minimize risk. When we exit Lightroom, we are prompted to back up the catalogue, but the backup defaults to the same drive as the catalogue, and so is not really a backup at all. If our main drive failed, we would lose both the catalogue and the backup. We need to change the location of the backup to another physical drive. In my case, I store it on a network attached drive, which is configured as a RAID, so has disk redundancy. So if we go into Lightroom and go to Catalog Settings, this shows us where our catalog lives, and that's on our main hard drive. You can choose how often you want to be reminded to do the backup. So when we quit from Lightroom, this prompt comes up, and this is where we can change the location of our backup. I've got mine set to go to the network attached storage drives, and I'm going to skip it this time. So if you go into the choose settings, you can then direct that backup to a location that's separate from the drive where your main Lightroom catalog lives. Now that we've moved the location of the automatic backup of the catalogue to a separate drive, the next level of catalogue backup for me is via Time Machine. When I'm at home in my office, I have a drive attached to my computer for Time Machine, which backs up my system, including the Lightroom catalogue, regularly throughout the day. So we can see here, when traveling I don't take the Time Machine drive, but instead take an SSD which I use to clone my Mac. I do this daily while away and episodically when at home. I use Carbon Copy Cloner and have a task set to automatically clone the internal drive when the external SSD is attached. So this is my little external SSD to clone onto. By bringing up Carbon Copy Cloner, I have a task set to clone my MacBook, and that runs automatically when the drive is connected. So when I connect that drive, this task runs automatically. Another level of backup is to make sure that any file adjustments are stored in XMP sidecar files with our image files. This setting is turned on in Lightroom Preferences, and it means that if you lose your catalogue, the edits are stored with the files and can be recovered when the files are imported into a new installation of Lightroom. So if we go into Catalog Preferences and go to the Metadata tab, this is the setting here that we can toggle on and off. And by having that turned on, it means all our edits are written into sidecar files next to the image files themselves. Looking at the image files in Finder, we can see that all the Nikon RAW files have an XMP file next to them. So we have the Nikon RAW file, the file next to it with exactly the same file name, but the XMP suffix has all the metadata and edits attached for this file. So even if we completely lose our Lightroom installation, lose our Lightroom catalog, these edits are stored with that image file. So that covers up backing Lightroom catalog safely. The next level of backup is of our image files. There's no way of doing this within Lightroom apart from the option to copy the files to two locations on import. I mentioned this in the import video and said that I don't do this as I don't want to back up files that I don't want to keep. I prefer to import one copy, throw away the rubbish, and then back up the files I want to keep. My strategy when traveling is to have one copy of my files on the memory cards. I have 1 3/4 terabytes of memory storage, which covers most trips. I then download to one external SSD, throw away the obvious rejects, and then back the keepers up to another external SSD. I have another little external SSD, that's my image copy, and I again use Carbon Copy Cloner to do that. So I connect that drive, launch Carbon Copy Cloner, and I have a task set up to copy the freshly downloaded images onto that backup drive. So every day after I've downloaded my files from my memory cards onto one SSD, deleting the obvious rubbish, I then back it up onto the second SSD. One of the drives stays in my computer bag with my computer, one is zipped into a pocket in my clothing, and my memory cards are back in my camera. So I have 3 copies of all my image files in 3 separate locations while on the road. When I return home, I move the folder of the trip into my main working drive, as I showed in the file management video. This drive is a mirrored RAID drive, so the files are stored on 2 disks in one enclosure. So what I'd do is, on the SSD drive, I'd grab the South Island trip and move it up into my 2022 folder. After each editing session, I use Carbon Copy Cloner to copy the year folder onto the network attached storage, and that takes with it all of the image files, all of the attached XMP files. So all my image files and edits are stored in 2 RAIDed drives. In addition to that, I episodically copy the year folder onto another external drive that gets stored in a fireproof safe, and another that goes off-site. I'm in the process of exploring changing this off-site option into a cloud backup solution, and I think Backblaze will be the best option for me. I just need the time to set up and wait for the initial backup to run, which is likely to take weeks. Hopefully this has been helpful to give you some insight into my catalog and image file backup strategy, and hopefully you can pick up some tips to apply to your own workflow to maximize the safety and minimize the risk to all your images and the work you've done in editing them.